In a world where borders are tested not only by geography but by ideology, where alliances are fragile and diplomacy often feels like a high-wire act, Ukraine stands alone yet determined, waging not just a war on the battlefield, but a battle for global consciousness. At the heart of this effort is President Volodymyr Zelensky. Once an actor turned wartime leader, he now wears the burden of a nation fighting for its very existence. His voice, firm, urgent, unmistakably human, has echoed through parliaments, summits, and digital screens across the globe. But in September 2025, that voice took a different tone. Speaking at the YES 2025 forum in Kyiv, Zelensky delivered a calculated yet emotional appeal, one aimed not at his usual allies in the West, but at a power seated much farther east, China. "We must find a way to influence China," he said, "so that they use their influence on Russia to end the war." It was more than a suggestion. It was a strategic pivot and perhaps a geopolitical gamble, because the truth is this: China and Russia have grown closer since the first days of the invasion. While Western democracies rallied behind Ukraine with arms, aid and diplomatic muscle, China charted a different course, one marked by silence, trade and carefully crafted statements of neutrality. But neutrality in the face of war is not peace. It's paralysis, and Zelensky knows that. Russia has become increasingly dependent on China, not just economically but politically. It sends its oil, gas and raw materials eastward in growing volumes, materials that fuel China's vast industries. The Kremlin's future, in many ways, is now intertwined with Beijing's interests, and that is precisely where Zelensky sees the opening. His logic is clear. If China holds leverage over Russia, economic, diplomatic and strategic, then perhaps it also holds the power to influence Moscow's next move. Perhaps, Zelensky argues, China could become not an enabler of war, but an arbiter of peace. To understand the weight of this ask, we need to understand the moment we're living in. The war in Ukraine is not simply a regional conflict. It is a global test. A test of alliances, a test of values, a test of whether the international community can stand united, not just in the aftermath of war, but during its most brutal chapters. From day one, Ukraine has asked for weapons, for sanctions, for solidarity, and the West has largely delivered. But this new appeal to bring China to the table is about something else entirely. It's about strategy, it's about diplomacy, it's about leverage, and it's risky, because while China has positioned itself as a neutral observer, its actions suggest a deeper alignment with Moscow. Trade between the two nations has surged. Joint military exercises continue. And in the halls of the United Nations, China often shields Russia from harsher international condemnation. Yet Zelensky refuses to believe this path is fixed. He argues that China, driven by global markets, its reputation, and long-term economic goals, has more to gain from peace than from silent complicity. In his words, "We need to find a way to motivate China to choose a path without war." But how do you motivate a superpower that prefers strategic ambiguity? According to Zelensky, the key lies in coordinated pressure from Europe, from America, from anyone with a seat at the geopolitical table. This isn't pressure in the form of threats or ultimatums. It's diplomatic pressure, economic pressure, moral pressure. It's the kind that reminds Beijing that history remembers those who act and those who do nothing. And time is not on Ukraine's side. Every day of this war brings new devastation, new families displaced, new lives lost. The images of shelled apartment blocks, empty classrooms, blood-stained sidewalks aren't fading, they're multiplying. Zelensky's message is wrapped in urgency because the cost of delay is measured in human lives. Still, this appeal is not born out of desperation, it's born out of possibility, because history tells us that pressure works. The Cold War ended not just because of arms races, but because of diplomacy, economic leverage, and coordinated strategy. Apartheid crumbled under the weight of international sanctions and global moral outrage. Even China itself has shifted course in the past, when the international stakes were high enough. So Zelensky asks, what if this is one of those moments? He doesn't ask China to turn its back on Russia. He asks it to look at the future and decide what role it wants to play. Does it want to be seen as a quiet partner in destruction or a global leader capable of influencing peace? Does it wish to stand on the sidelines of history or help shape its outcome? These are not abstract questions. They are the very questions that define how this war will end and what the post-war world will look like. And so Zelensky turns to Europe and the United States, not just for continued support, but for something harder: unity in message, coherence in strategy, and above all, persistence in reminding China that global leadership requires global responsibility. The stakes are enormous because every missile that strikes a Ukrainian home is not just a weapon, it's a symbol of who acted and who stayed silent. As the YES 2025 forum drew to a close, Zelensky left the stage not with fanfare, but with the heavy silence of a world listening, not just to what he said, but to what he didn't need to say. His challenge was clear: China has influence. The question is, will it use it? And for the rest of the world, the responsibility is just as great: to ensure that the cost of inaction is no longer invisible, that silence has consequences, and that peace, while elusive, is not impossible if the right voices speak at the right time. Today, Zelensky's voice is one of them, but it cannot be the only one, because wars are not ended by heroes alone. They are ended by coalitions, by conscience, by choice, and the world must now choose.